Hello everyone, this is Rohit Surisetty, currently pursuing BTech second year at IIT Kharagpur. Thanks for joining us for today's digital discourse with JP sir. Today we are very honored to have Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan sir, former Indian public administrator and founder of Lok Satta Party, along with us to discuss on topics such as crisis as opportunity, mental health, and role of youth in politics and civil services. Before we begin, I would like to introduce you all my co-panelists, Jansi Saumya, Said Tahsin, Saugan Filkana, Shweta Basina, and Vamsi Chaitanya. I now request Jansi Saumya to initiate the discussion on crisis as opportunity. Once again, we welcome you, sir.
My pleasure.
Good evening, sir. I'm Saumya. My first question is on crisis as an opportunity. How can students utilize this time productively at home? And what books do you suggest for youth to read during this lockdown, sir?
Soumya, first of all, just imagine that this crisis happened 30 years ago. Just play a mind game. And imagine the conditions 30 years ago in India. Many of you might have come from, how many are there in the audience today, roughly? How many are participating in this?
We have around 180 members. Will be joining us.
Okay. So most of you, this 180, 200 people, you might have come from cities, but I'm sure your parents came from villages in most cases. And I'm certain that 30 years ago, even if you were living in cities in most parts of India, there was no stable electricity. There used to be 10, 15 shutdowns a day. Villages, of course, no. If you get 3-4 hours electricity, you're lucky. Imagine the same COVID crisis without electricity, without television, and of course, there was no internet. There were no telephones available. This whole mobile telephony, this whole revolution is now. There was nothing in those days. No, only very few people, only 1% of the population actually, under 1%, only 70 lakh telephones were there in the whole country, 7 million. Today you have 1 billion mobile phones, no connectivity. And then you have this pandemic. Imagine the kind of chaos and panic and disaster. And imagine the boredom, you talk about mental health. Imagine the boredom and complete collapse of civilization. Today, for the kind of work that you do or you wish to do, you have electricity in most places in India, most of the day, 24 hours, maybe occasional disruptions. Everybody has a mobile phone. Most people have internet connection. And thanks to the web, today, knowledge is now at your fingertip. Almost anything you can research instantly. So there's so much we can do, particularly people like you with technology background. There's so much you can do. Actually, in a way, it's a godsend. It's a great opportunity. You and I did not want this crisis, but smart people can utilize this time productively. Thinking, looking at the way our society or whole of mankind, depending on your proclivity, what can be done? Because remember, this sort of a thing to us is quite unique because for about a lifetime, we have not seen this for about 60, 70, 100 years. But throughout history, lives were shaped more by pandemics than by wars. If you take the First World War, the total number of deaths in Spanish flu after the war were greater than the total number of deaths in the First World War itself. And the First World War itself saw extraordinary deaths because they knew how to kill, but they did not know how to save. Medical technology has not improved, but the destructive technology, war technology has improved enough to kill people. So that is the kind of world for centuries, for millennia. Except that we are not used to it. It could happen again. I don't know. I hope it will not happen during your lifetimes, but you never know. With global warming, other things, maybe there'll be more like this. So I see it as an opportunity. Now, what you want to read, it's entirely up to you. I don't think there's anybody who can tell you what to do. But if you ask me what I do, I love technology stuff, because I truly believe that the world is on the verge of a great revolution. Very much like, the third revolution before this was the whole computer revolution. Before that was the consumer goods and electricity and so on and so forth. Before that was the steam engine and mechanization. So now we are in the fourth industrial revolution. I believe the world is going to change dramatically. The way things are happening in the energy sector, for instance, solar power, storage batteries, the cost plummeting, for instance. and all kinds of new technologies that will transform the energy sector and therefore the world. And of course, additive manufacturing, the 3D printing and others, which may actually change the whole manufacturing sector. And this whole disruption of supply chains on account of COVID may give fillip to this decentralized additive manufacturing. So I believe that the world is on the threshold of a revolution. You can prepare yourselves for that by study, by understanding. Two, if you're interested in history, understanding historical patterns, there is so much to understand. In front of me, there are so many books. One, I'm reading a book on genes by Siddharth Mukherjee. I'm reading a book by Grant Austin on India's constitutional evolution. I'm reading a book on discovery of India, great archaeologists and historians of the British era, whether it is Wilson Jones or Prinsep or Cunningham or others. They actually gave us our sense of history. We didn't know Ashoka, we didn't know Mauryas, we didn't know 100 other things. Most of the things we know about our history, they were a gift of these great and intrepid and committed people who researched and studied, excavated, and then gave us a sense of knowledge. I'm trying to understand that. Then I'm reading a book of Dalrymple about anarchy, the last days of the Mughal Raj and the rise of the British, what happened during that very critical period. So it depends on what you want to do. And intellectual athleticism, you don't have to do anything. You just acquire, enjoy. There's so much we can do. So I don't think this time is wasted for very sharp minds. If you really know what you want in life or in terms of knowledge, I see it as a great opportunity. Most of our freedom fighters, they enriched themselves when they were in prison because they were with enforced rest and no communication with anybody, nothing to do. In those days, books and paper and pen are there, so they wrote or they studied. So there's a lot we can do. Enjoy it. And let's do the best we can to come out of this, but with a better India. It's not merely enough to go back to status quo, but we have to actually create a better India. That's why I keep talking about crisis as an opportunity, because crisis is a terrible thing to waste. It's a terrible opportunity to waste, as Paul Romer, a distinguished economist, said. And the countries like India seem to change only when there is crisis. Even mankind generally is prepared for radical changes only when there's crisis. So let's use this crisis as an opportunity. Don't be despondent, make the most of it.
Thank you, sir. Now I will request Tahsin to ask.
Good evening, sir. This is
Yes,
Tahsin,
Tahsin.
and I'm studying MBA second year in Andhra Medical College. I have a question, sir.
Great. Oh, great. Go on.
What are your views on the future of educational institutions in India after this lockdown, sir?
Tahsin, it's a great question. World over, there is a problem because now we don't know how long, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, in varying degrees, there's going to be disruption. Therefore, the traditional classroom and the teacher, the direct interface and traditional examinations and teaching, all that probably will not be there for quite some time. I actually see this as an opportunity for India because, let's be truthful. Today's India has absolutely third-rate education. All of you, whether Tahsin from Vizag or the kids in all of you, the bright youngsters in Kharagpur, IIT or elsewhere, you are all some of the finest products of this country. You're doing well not because of the education system, but despite the education system. We have a rotten educational edifice in this country. A few of you, because you're bright, you worked hard, or your parents gave you support, were lucky to get good teachers or rare good schools, you somehow came out of this unscathed. But the bulk of Indians, they have absolutely third-rate education. Their certificates and degrees mean nothing. They have neither knowledge nor skills. And I can give you chapter and verse about all kinds of surveys in the country to show how incredibly bad it is. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't see this as a disruption. I think it's an opportunity. Where is the disruption? If something is going well, then there's a disruption. If something is rotten anyway, there's an opportunity to rebuild. And now if distance education and the deficiencies of teachers, if they can be overcome by electronic mode of communication, with the social media, with all the platforms that we have, and we innovatively do it, and if we figure out how to evaluate these students intelligently and honestly, and if we also figure out some ways of interactive teaching, even as you have modules like khanacademy.org, I think there is a fantastic opportunity in school education to transform it. And Indian school education is desperately in need of transformation. 80% of the children of India, despite being bright, merely because of the circumstances at their birth, have no chance at all to have a decent future. It's a shame. It's a disgrace. I think this whole COVID crisis and therefore the compulsion to go digital and to relook at educational method, I think it's a great opportunity. I genuinely feel. And luckily, thanks to many of you and your predecessors, some platforms are built from khanacademy.org to many other platforms. Some very bright young Indians have been devoting their time for the past 10, 15 years, in particular past 10 years, enormously to improve the quality of school education. So maybe we are ready. If only we get together, I think we're in exciting times. Similarly, university education. The same problem that we have in school education is also there in university education. Just because a few medical schools and a few IITs and IIMs, they are pretty good, let's not pretend that our university education is good. Most graduates and undergraduate, postgraduates in India, for no fault of theirs, they are absolutely subpar by global standards. Many of them cannot even compete with a school graduate. I know what I say is very hurtful, but because we're talking among ourselves, we must be truthful. If you want to address the problem, if you want to set things right, first thing is acknowledge the facts. Don't doctor the evidence. Then apply logic. Then look at the best practices. See what works in our circumstances. Innovate and then implement. If we don't even start with understanding what is the current situation, we'll never improve it. That's why I'm being somewhat tough. These things are really abysmally bad. And even in the rest of the world where educational quality is good, many people, the parents and the kids, increasingly are coming to believe that higher education has become very expensive, beyond the reach of most of the kids. And therefore, the parental wealth is giving the chance to the youngsters, not necessarily their ability and hard work. Now, supposing university education, it has to be slightly different. It can't be the same as school education because you're not dealing with one template and a few desirable outcomes. You're looking at the whole expanse of education and innovation and research and so on and so forth. But if you actually make it increasingly non-campus oriented, more and more digital. Now already, even years ago, MIT has made all its courses open source software. If only you're interested, and maybe if you require, if you have a guide required, no, other than required, you have all MIT, the world's best technology schools curriculum available to everybody all over the world. Harvard, a few courses, some 26 courses, they made them open source software recently. Supposing we have a situation where you can actually equip yourself with all that, if only you have the ability, irrespective of the means, and be comparable to anybody else, then university is only for fun, that experience, and maybe networking. It's not about knowledge and skills. So I think we're in exciting times in education because the technology is just right. Maybe the COVID crisis is a spur to push us in that direction and make the most use of it.
Hello, sir. I'm Saurabh. So my
Yes,
doubt
sir.
is this. These days, several companies have tried shifting to a digital workspace, and I've seen many advantages of that in terms of better work-life balance or lesser travel time or lesser exposure to pollution. Do you think it is advisable to make this shift permanent, or do you see some disadvantages associated with this shift in terms of productivity of people?
I don't think there'll be a 100% shift. Even among the workers whose work is amenable to distance working, at home working, I think you can perhaps cut down the commute and travel and other things by 60-70%, but 20-30% interface would be still required because there's no substitute to group dynamic, group interaction, face-to-face on occasion. For instance, even now I go to office regularly, I meet my team, but a lot of work is done from home. I'm now working from home and my team also, but at the same time we also meet. But we don't have to meet as often as we used to meet earlier, regular morning 9 to evening 5 or whatever. So I think what will happen for a significant section of the people at the high end of the technology, whose work is amenable to be performed from a distance through digital, it's most intellectual work rather than physical work. I think there'll be 70%, and I'm giving you a crude number, a back number. 70% I think we will be able to do without physical interaction. But I think 25-30% we still need that for bonding, for understanding better, for the group dynamic, for efficient interaction and getting a synthesis, etc. Similarly, travel, I think we've gotten used to excessive travel. While travel industry will suffer, I think travel will definitely come down to a significant extent. It will not disappear, but the kind of travel, jet setting that we had earlier will not be there. Because even people like me who are very unfamiliar with technology, I'm now using this Zoom or whatever, interacting with you. I would not have imagined that I would do it without my secretary's assistance 3 or 6 months. But today, A, technology has become accessible to even people like me. B, we're getting a little familiar with that and we find the joy of this. Without disruption of life, you can actually do reasonably productive work. So to that extent, I think there will be a significant change. It may not be a bad thing, but there will be, to that extent, again, a hit to the economy. If commute is coming down, if the vehicles are coming down, travel is coming down, there will be a hit to the economy. The Economist, for instance, said perhaps 2 months ago that we're going to the 90% economy, even if the whole pandemic disappears. And even if we restart life, probably for quite some time, 10% of the economy will not be able to recover easily. Travel, tourism, hospitality, entertainment, things like that, probably will not see a significant recovery for quite some time. I think we have to get used to that, at least for some time. What will happen after 3 years, 5 years? It will be too early to predict. But if all these things lead to also a deeper understanding of how to enhance productivity and quality of life without necessarily damaging the environment, maybe that's a good thing.
Sir, also the job offers of graduating batch in recent times. Would you advise them to take up higher studies and wait till the economy stabilizes, or do you see new opportunities opening in the near future?
I think all the above. I don't think you can have a norm because we don't know. Honestly, even without COVID, let's remember, it used to be said for the past decade or so, because we are on the threshold of the fourth industrial revolution, that 70% of the jobs the youngsters today are going to do maybe 20 years later, they have not been created yet. That is before COVID. Now, post-COVID, it's going to be even more radically different. Therefore, in any case, we are facing a world which is different from the world of our parents or your parents. And now COVID made it even more rapid, this transition. Therefore, I think, you must look for opportunities and don't look for the traditional jobs that you were used to seeing or your seniors are used to looking for the past 25 years, more innovative. And B, also equip yourself with the knowledge and the skills and understanding of where the economy is headed. I don't think anybody knows precisely, but I think you have some glimpses of what is likely to happen. So it will be smart if you really combine both. Again, as we discussed, today's education need not mean that you actually are on campus and you don't do anything else. You can do a job, whatever is available, then you can pursue your education and upgrade your skills and then see where the economic opportunities come, and them both. You have to be much more nimble-footed. It can't be compartmentalized like in earlier days, I suspect.
Good evening, sir. I am Shweta. My question is regarding mental health, sir. In India, nearly 197 million people need help from a psychiatrist, but there is still a taboo among Indians in seeking out help from a psychiatrist. What changes should be done at individual and government level to change their mindset, sir?
Shweta, it's a good question. World over, because of the taboo or lack of knowledge and ignorance, mental health has not been given enough importance, nor do we know the magnitude of the problem. But increasingly, the number 10% is talked about world over in some form or other, from clinical depression to much more serious psychotic illnesses. They are more rare, but clinical depression is a much more common thing, or anxiety neurosis and so on and so forth. About 10% of the people at some time or other are affected by this, to the point that their health, their well-being, their family and personal relationships, and their work, they're affected. But the world doesn't really, we haven't really devoted that kind of resources. We don't have 10% of doctors and nurses devoted to that, 10% of money in healthcare devoted to that. The world, all over the world, they're slow to catch up. India is much more slow because our healthcare itself is in shambles. Even normal healthcare, straightforward healthcare, which we understand better, if you diagnose and give a medication or intervene surgically, you know how to cure it. Even those, we are doing very badly in most cases. Even immunization, even today, it's only for some of the diseases. Not all the vaccines that are available are administered. Though recently there's an expansion, and I have been privileged to at least get one of those things in place, the MMR and MR vaccine, but it took me 19 years to persuade the powers that be to make it universal. But there are many more things that are to be added. We are nowhere there. And even those that are now part of the universal immunization program, only about 60-65% kids get immunization. 35-40% kids even today do not get immunization. So when even the basic healthcare at a low cost, where we know what to do and it's a very simple, straightforward intervention, we're abysmally bad. Obviously, mental health is much more complicated, much more sophisticated, much more resource intensive. We are very poor. But one good fortune for India is so far, the families have been strong. Therefore, most of the problems within a family, if somebody is disturbed a little bit, somebody a little depressed or something, our family support system is taking care of them. In the West, because of highly nuclear families and single individual families and tremendous sense of loneliness and alienation, problems get compounded. Whereas in India, because you're together, even if there's no joint family system, in a family, of course, we keep shouting at each other, we have problems, but ultimately family stands as one. And two, there are strong bonds of friendship. You don't require always, to take an appointment to go and meet somebody, on a backslapping basis. Relationships are much more friendly and much more relaxed in our culture. Maybe that's actually a blessing because while it invades your privacy, you really don't have private time or private thoughts. But the advantage is that you're not alienated, you're not lonely. I think much of the mental health burden is now handled by the family system, but we can't depend on that forever. Certainly, we have to devote resources in healthcare. It's not merely the question of money. We simply don't have mental health specialists in adequate numbers. So a very small number in the country. So we have to enlarge that number. We don't always have to depend on a doctor and a psychiatrist. We can train a large number of psychologists for counseling for simple problems. Without prescriptions, mere counseling will help a great deal. And if necessary, they can refer that to a regular psychiatrist who can actually consult and then give the treatment, etc. So we can have a graded approach to meeting the needs. But I do agree that there is a problem. But we cannot underestimate the importance of family. There cannot be a solution outside the family. Everything cannot be in rupees and pay, because then the cost will go up. The benefits will not be commensurate with the cost. Wherever the family can absorb much of the problem, that is the best way to handle it. I think that India is able to do reasonably well, but knowledge is a problem. Except in the enlightened circles, in other most of the families, mental illness is not understood adequately. All kinds of taboos, superstitions still rule. Therefore, wide dissemination of knowledge is very important, right from school and college level.
Hello, sir. This is Rohit again, sir. As you just stated, the number of psychiatrists are very less than the number of physicians in India, sir. What steps can be incentivized to make more people into psychiatry, sir?
No, in general, India doesn't have enough specialists. In almost any country in the world, once you go to medical school, once you finish undergraduation, almost certainly you get a postgraduate admission. Now, what kind of specialization you can do depends on your own aptitude and opportunity. But there is no denying the opportunity. Whereas in India, getting into post-graduation in medical sciences is as tough as getting into undergraduation, which is incredibly tough in itself. So we created a somewhat unhappy structure. That must be set right, even general medical care. Even if you do that, psychiatry, please remember, put it in larger perspective. Psychiatry cannot take away 50% of the medical personnel, impossible, because there is enormous disease burden. Please remember, rest of the physical diseases, the burden in India is extraordinary. We have 2,000 children dying a day. This number is simply mind-boggling. In the last 150 days, we're talking about COVID and COVID crisis. In India, 3 lakh children below 5 years of age died. In case of COVID, 16,000 people died, and naturally we are upset. But 20 times that number died, children, innocent children for fault of theirs, entirely preventable, 100% preventable, most of them. 800 people are dying every day because of tuberculosis. In this day and age, the medication is there, diagnosis simple, so on and so forth. Every day, 50,000 malaria cases are appearing in this country, 50,000. Thousands of dengue fever. I can go on and on. So mental illness is important, but this very tunnel vision, looking at a problem and then thinking that is the most important problem, ignoring everything else, life doesn't work like that. You have to ultimately look at the bigger picture, and given our economic situation and our managerial capability, we have to decide what is the optimal way of deploying resources. And I think if we really create a graded cadre, because millions of kids are doing undergraduation in this country. If you can't deploy enough medical graduates, let there be specialists in mental health, as many as possible. But you can have 10 times that number of people who are trained in mental health. They can be counselors. So I think we have to do a careful planning. That's why you also create jobs. One of the problems about employment in our country is our education. Education, first of all, is third rate because we're not getting anything worthwhile. Even when there is something worthwhile, it's not really useful in the sense of fulfilling the needs of the society. We can perhaps look at all this. And there are a lot of areas where we need services to be delivered. If education doesn't transform itself to meet those needs, then there'll be always this gulf between the so-called education and the society's needs, and therefore employment.
Hi sir, this is Vamsi Chaitanya.
Yes,
My
Vamsi.
question is, what are the methods educational institutions should adopt to boost mental health among students?
I think there are three things I can think of, very off the cuff. I have not given deep thought to this, but I'm just giving an off the cuff response. The first is the taboo. If somebody says, look, I have fever and chills, it's a perfectly respectable thing. There is no shame in that. So we say, look, I have fever and chills, and I go to a doctor may say, yeah, it's some other disease, and then give a treatment. Whereas if somebody says, look, I'm depressed, and somehow, my mind is wandering, or I'm hearing some voices, or something else, I am seeing things which are not there, then it's a taboo. I think first, we must make young people recognize that it is a genuine problem. And a significant number of people suffer from that. There is no reason to have taboo. I remember in my childhood in the village, a woman probably of hysteria, I do not even know the diagnosis, I was just 9 or 10 years old at the time. What did they do? In a almost a procession in the village, with 10, 20 people surrounding her with all this drum and this, that. They took this neem tree, those branches, they took that, and then they were beating the hell out of her. Because the idea is, if there's mental illness, the devil has taken possession of her. And you have to now exorcise the devil by using this neem branches, because neem leaf is supposed to be very pious. This superstition, this physical maltreatment, all over the world it happened. It might have happened in India even 20, 30 years ago, but in the rest of the world, 100, 150 years ago, it happened in many countries. So this taboo, first, educate people. The second is, encourage them to seek out help when they have a problem, or to give help when somebody else whom they know, in the family or among friends or others, encourage them. Third is, give them some basic, minimal understanding of some of the broad spectrum of mental illnesses, so that when the time comes, they're not completely babes in the wood. So if this much at least at school, college level, part of the curriculum, extracurricular or something else, you don't have to have fancy things. Even a 3-4 hour interaction altogether, but very purposive and productive, can help them a great deal. These are things I can think of off the cuff. Once we are equipped, at least with some understanding, and the taboo is eliminated, at least we know where to seek help and how to order our lives better. And I think in a broader sense, a sense of perspective in life. At the end of the day, what matters? Because modernity also means complexity. It also means enormous stresses. Now, if we look back, people a few hundred years ago or even 100 years ago had so little compared to what we have today, and they were leading probably much less stressful lives. We have so much more, and yet there is enormous stress. Maybe there is a way of having a quality of life without too much of stress. Each of us actually must look at that too, because ultimately we have to work on ourselves to the extent possible.
Hello, sir. I'm Soumya again.
Yes, Soumya.
My question is on role of youth in politics. Today, if you see, everyone is behind jobs and hardly no one cares about politics and nation. If that's the case, can India prosper without youth in politics? If not, what can be done to increase the role of youth in politics?
Great question, Soumya. There are two broad issues. I probably am one, at least in the past generation or so, to give a very strong call to the middle classes and the youth not to ignore politics. And I probably coined the expression, politics is a noble endeavor. The notion that politics is bad, it's dirty, don't touch it, is a very silly notion. And as Plato said, the price we pay if we ignore politics is to suffer the bad governance of fools. Ultimately, we are suffering. Therefore, there's no question of ignoring politics. It's foolish. And I'm glad that increasingly young people and middle classes, they are getting more engaged than before. 30 years ago, when I embarked on this journey to try and help work with like-minded people to engineer reform in the country, generally the middle class and educated Indians and youth, they viewed politics with complete distaste. They're holding their noses and staying away. Most people don't even go to the polling booths, and things were pretty dismal. But I think things are improving. Politically, people are getting engaged. I'm happy about that. Then the second question is, what is the meaning of politics? If politics means that you actually go and contest elections, I wish I could tell you, as somebody who has encouraged that too, founded a political party, contested myself, and I encourage many people to contest. I wish I could tell you that there is space available there and you can actually make a contribution. In most parts of India, sadly, it is not true. Because the kind of money power that is required for illegitimate use, not legitimate use, to buy the vote, to distribute all kinds of gifts, or the kinds of irrational promises which are unrelated to the growth and the future prosperity of the people, but short-term freebies, converting people into beggars, or the lies and the divisions in society, caste, region, religion, etc., in order to get the vote banks and the votes, etc. Now, if this is politics, I don't think we should be part of that. That is the problem. In order to improve that, you have to do two things. One, participate in the process to change the rules of the game, to improve the content of it. And increasingly, two, make the local governments more relevant. Delhi has seen a refreshing example of some change. Bright young people have joined politics and are joining politics, are engaging with politicians, even if they're not actively contesting, etc., looking at governance issues, playing a role in education, healthcare, other things. That's exactly what politics should be. Why did it happen in Delhi? Delhi government is the most empowered local government in India. Once people understood, particularly in the urban context, the link between the vote I give, the taxes I pay, and the benefits I receive in return, then politics will undergo change. It's not about some great man there, and it's not about the jamboree, it's about my life. That link is missing in a very highly centralized system. So we have to A, change the nature of politics, political reform, B, decentralize power in a sensible way, particularly in urban areas. Rural is going to be harder because of obvious problems, poverty, the talent is fleeing the villages, economy in rural areas is much harder, and the sense of dependency, the client relationship is much more deeply entrenched, casteism. So it's going to change, but first cities and big towns. That's why in this whole exercise of transforming India and then using COVID crisis as an opportunity, FDR, Foundation for Democratic Reforms that I run, is organizing a series of webinars. Last Saturday we had on healthcare, very well attended, and some very high quality people participated, a former Health Secretary Government of India, very eminent experts in the healthcare field, and so on and so forth. Next Saturday, we're having one on agricultural supply chains and how to rejuvenate agriculture. The COVID crisis showed us that crisis time, it makes it even more difficult for the farmers to get incomes and the consumers to get what they need at a reasonable price. The next week after that, we're looking at big city governance, because COVID crisis largely is a big city problem. If you notice, Chennai, Hyderabad, Bengaluru, Mumbai, Delhi, elsewhere, for obvious reasons. Therefore, can we actually improve the architecture of big cities, even if we can't change all local governments? What are the things that can be done with relative ease? So supposing some such thing is done, then a lot more bright people can actually play a role very effectively in the local governance. And ultimately, all governance and politics is local. Everything else is only slogans. And meanwhile, I think we must play a role in politics with a small p. What are the specific reforms? Service delivery, quality of education we talked about, quality of healthcare, and a whole lot of other things, rule of law, police and crime investigation, justice delivery. So how do we improve those things? By raising our voice and by collective informed assertion. So political engagement need not necessarily mean going and contesting for parliament and assembly. I wish that opportunity is available, But in most cases, that opportunity is closed in India. And even if you do contest there, and occasionally because of a variety of factors, you do manage to succeed, ultimately you're part of the game. You're not really changing the game. So it's a very complicated thing. You must revisit the notion of politics and playing a role in politics.
So this is Saugand. So what do you think is the appropriate age for youth to be actively involved in politics? Like, is joining in student unions and getting experience better, or should they wait till they graduate?
I think the moment you begin to understand that you're a citizen, you or your parents are paying taxes, and what those in power are doing makes a difference to your life, you should be engaged. It could be 15 years, 16 years, immediately joining college, etc. Then the modus operandi, student unions, by all means, yes, provided, this is an important thing. The student unions should not be allowed to become appendages of traditional political parties. Because traditional political parties are messed up the way they run, not because they're bad, because they became victims of a vicious cycle. And if they bring the same practices and culture to student union politics, then you're not really benefiting the society. You're not part of creating new kind of politics for the future of India. You are simply becoming their pawns. Therefore, if the student unions are structured differently in the electoral system and the way they conduct themselves, then yes, absolutely, the college campuses, they should begin in terms of ideas, in terms of real innovation, in terms of real outcomes, and designing electoral models which are actually better, not this kind of ugly models, so that you set an example to the rest of the world. One of the problems of India is the example of assembly and parliament are seeping into Lions and Rotary clubs, seeping into professional bodies, seeping into student unions. Instead of the best practices from the rest of society influencing politics, politics with a big P is influencing the rest of society. I think that should not be allowed in the students' unions. You must become new generation leaders with a new way of doing things. If that is the case, I would like you to start with students' unions.
Hi, sir. This is Nataraj.
Yes, Nataraj.
So my question is regarding the budget, sir. Like, if we see current budgets, mostly they're welfare focused, and more than 50-60% is focused on distribution of money. So what is the ideal way, sir? Like, we know this is not working out for the last 60 years. So what is the right way?
It's a great question. You know, if you take most states of India, the salaries to employees who may or may not work, and most often, we don't feel that we're getting services. And of course, we all know corruption for even the simplest delivery. And the freebies that you give to individuals, not the government doing what it ought to be doing for us collectively, or enhance our individual capability to earn through education, healthcare, skills, job opportunities. That is where prosperity is, not simply somebody giving a handout. But most of the money is going to these two things. A bit of money is going for some very highly visible big projects where you can get big kickbacks and pretend that you're doing something great. After that, nothing is left. In the process, as you hinted, the government's basic tasks, what is the government's basic task? What you and I as individuals cannot do, and what the market cannot do. You can't go and buy in the market, or somebody won't do it because that is not amenable to competition, choice, and pricing. Then collectively, we must be able to do, and that is government. We have forgotten that. That means rule of law, police investigation, prosecution, justice. Without that, there's no stable society, there's no orderly society. That means basic infrastructure, transport, electricity, water supplies, sewerage, stormwater drainage, traffic management, and so on and so forth. That means quality education. We discuss in some length education, quality healthcare. These are the fundamentals. A government that does not deliver them efficiently, at no out-of-pocket cost in most cases, or at a reasonable user fee, that government is unfit to govern. In India, the governments have spectacularly failed in most of these basic tasks. And they think their job is to somehow buy the vote and then get into power and then give freebies and say, I have given you, give me the vote again. So you're absolutely right. But now we come to a situation, merely because you and I give a lecture, it will not change because it's too late. If somebody says, I will not give anything, you're out. So I think there are two ways we can address. One is at the macro level. Just as there's an FRBM Act, Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, I think a time has come. In fact, I've been strongly urging the government of India that the parliament must enact a law. You can't take away the subsidies now being given. At least consolidate them. Don't have 50 programs. Make one program. Target them efficiently. Make sure that the widest number of people who deserve the assistance, they get it without any corruption or without any harassment directly through the bank or something. Remove all the other forms of subsidies. Consolidate everything. And make it a single flagship program. And put a cap on that. Just like FRBM said, you cannot, the fiscal deficit cannot exceed this amount or this percentage. You put a cap on that. That experts can sit and see what is now happening, what is the budgetary requirement, what are the basic needs, what are the government's tasks, etc. And how much is being spent now. We can't take away what is being spent, but as budgets expand, because as economy grows, if 100 rupees today becomes 200 rupees. So even if today, my God, it's a big amount, if you are disciplined from now, progressively its share will come down. The quantity will not come down. So I think some such framework is required at the national level because no state on its own is capable of doing it. Because whichever party tries to do it, the people will punish them, their opposition will take advantage of that. The second is decentralize power as much as possible so that two things happen. One is the people realize earlier, as I mentioned to you, the link between the taxes I pay and the services I get. Once I understand that, I don't want freebies. I actually want the money to go to improve the road in front of my house, the water supply to my house, the hospital where my family goes, the school where my kids study, or the sewerage, or the drinking water, or whatever. So people understand the basic needs. No, the elevator in my apartment complex, if it doesn't function, I will holler because the elevator is important for me, for my mother, aged, and if she is living with me, then obviously she cannot climb up 5 floors, and I will not care about any other freebie because this is real. Whereas if it's a distant government where the local services are not handled by them, everything is bhashans, Bharat Mata, and therefore freebies, therefore all kind of myths. So localized government. The second thing is, supposing you want to desubsidize, you tell the people, look, these subsidies are bad. Our bright IIT kids are telling us it's a wasteful expenditure. Let us remove them. People will slap you because at least there's something tangible they're getting in a country where almost nothing is coming to them from government. But supposing at a local level, you say you lose this 100 rupees, but this 100 rupees is used in a different manner to benefit you. When they see the alternative, then there is a conversation. Then the people are likely to accept it. That's why I keep giving the example of the elevator, the lift. If the lift is what is important to me, then I know that money must go first there. Or the electricity supply to my apartment complex, or the water supply to my complex, or the watch and ward, because they're important things. So you see that happening. Then there can be a negotiation, you can desubsidize, and that desubsidized money saved can go locally on that condition. So if you say, let's say 20 crores in the town, the 20 crores goes to your city, your town, you figure out what you want to do. Conversation. For both these reasons, decentralization. Therefore, now I think India must look at it seriously. All the fiscal experts, economists, and scholars, there's no point complaining and attacking. Politicians have a difficult task. Okay, is it better now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, on its own it went to mute, I'm sorry. So
Yeah.
world over, one of the greatest challenges in democratic governance is how do you reconcile the short-term pain with the long-term gain? Politicians always find it easy. Am I audible?
Yes,
Am I
sir.
audible?
Yes, sir.
Politicians always find it easy to offer something immediately for power, but at the cost of the long-term good. So to make people see the long-term good and vote for that is not an easy thing. So you must have very delicate instruments to make people realize every minute. Even at home, this is what happens. I'm sure even IITians like you guys, when you were young, many of you, when your parents were telling you, look, be a little focused. I know that watching TV or something else fun is interesting, but your future is important. I'm sure your parents were not very popular, right? You accepted it because your parents love you and because maybe you are too small to rebel. But in a society, after all, the people don't think the leaders love them. Therefore, there is no reason to accept the leaders, what the leaders say. So how do you create instruments to make people realize their own long-term self-interest? That's one of the greatest challenges. In India, generally, we have not succeeded very well. And that's why we have to look at very careful structuring and designing.
I now request Sweta to proceed.
Sir, this is Shweta again. Why are most political leaders in India are businessmen and not employees? Is it because employees have to resign their job before contesting in politics?
No, first of all, many countries like India, they try and see that there is a clear distinction between the bureaucracy and the political process. Bureaucracy is permanent, politically neutral, and they have to execute policies. Whereas political executive is obviously, for the time being, as long as the people give them the mandate, and there's intense competition in the marketplace of ideas, and with the mandate of the people, they deliver the change. And therefore, it has to be necessarily people with means, with ability, with credibility. Unless you have a proven record of service, you have visibility, unless you have people have a reason to trust you, you will not be a viable candidate. But sadly, what's happening in India is, instead of the record of service, their ability, it is your pedigree, because you're so-and-so's son, your caste, and how much money you bring to the table, so that you can distribute the money for illegitimate purposes. They have become the determinants of elections in India. Barack Obama won both the elections hands down. He was virtually unknown even a few years before he became president. And Obama then or now was not a very wealthy man. And yet Obama spent hundreds of millions of dollars because he raised the money from the people transparently and spent the money honestly for legitimate purposes. That's the way the system should be built. Another thing is, for political recruitment, if you have, again, local governments, everything you touch, you go to local governments. If local governments are genuine, strong, and effective, people become effective, they get known, and then they rise. During freedom struggle, some of our greatest leaders, they came through local governments. Chittaranjan Das, Subhash Chandra Bose, Babu Rajendra Prasad, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, Vittalbhai Patel, Chakravarti Rajagopalachari, Rajaji, Prakasham Pantulu, you name any number of them, Firozshah Mehta, all of them made their name in local governments and then rose to national fame. Even post-independence, after 1958-59 Panchayat Raj, many people in many states and their country, national prominence. In the last 20-25 years, there's almost no leader of significance that emerged from local governments. We killed them. So unless local governments are strong and empowered, legitimate talent cannot rise. It will be only parachuting because of fame, money, and cash. And this is not the right way to run a country. Hello?
Hi, sir. This is Vamsi again.
Yes, Vamsi.
Lok Satta tried hard in bringing RTI Act in India to demolish corruption in 2005. But still in rural areas, corruption is happening often at MRO and BRO level. Do you think this is just because of lack of awareness about the RTI Act? If yes, in what ways can the youth be helped?
Vamsi, one of the problems with well-meaning enthusiasts and civil society leaders is they sometimes give an impression that there's one panacea. You just do it and everything will be solved. No, there's no single answer to all the problems. We require a lot of answers.
Yes, sir.
I never committed the mistake of telling people that no, if this is over, everything will be done. No, there are many things to be done. Transparency and people knowing what is happening is one step. Necessary, but not sufficient. Accountability in service delivery. Supposing you give time frames for every service. There's a delay, you have a mechanism by which for the delay, every day delay, you get a compensation from those people. And the fellows who are delaying it get to face the music. Suppose there's independent structure to address that. Similarly, supposing you have crime investigation, prosecution. I don't know, obviously there's no time to go into details, and speedy and efficient justice. No, we have to make this machine of government work. You have to put many things in place. Everyone is necessary. Right information is certainly, I'm very proud of it. Arun and I in particular have been privileged to be able to draft that and push it, and then the political system agreed and unanimously the parliament gave consent. It happened. I was privileged to get many other legislations, the local courts law, almost single-handedly I accomplished it, but it's not working because in no state are they taking it seriously, though the law is there. Even if you create an instrument, if the political system is not willing to apply it, and the people are not sufficiently aware, and therefore they're not pushing for it, and the media discourse is ignoring it, It will not happen. Therefore, does it mean that the law is unnecessary? The law is necessary, but a lot more is necessary. Similarly, the 97th Amendment to the Constitution. Again, I was privileged to single-handedly pilot that and get it through by unanimous consent in Parliament, giving autonomy. 99th Amendment to the Constitution about higher court. Supreme Court wrongly quashed it. There's nothing I could do. Maybe later people of India will realize the court is wrong and higher court cannot be made by the judges themselves. It is wrong constitutionally and more people don't see it that way. So this transformation, great nation, a complex nation, is a process, detailed process, and sometimes consuming. I wish all this could be done in 5 years. Now, my dreams of the movement was in 5 years, if you have evidence, you have logic, you have a solution, what's the big deal? Let's implement it. But unfortunately, society doesn't respond that way. Society sometimes takes longer. There are some things which I could accomplish in 1 hour. At least the decision making, though the process takes some time. There are some simple things that took me years and years. A simple vaccination, MMR vaccination, it took me 19 years. Simple improvement of electoral rolls, it took me 15, 16 years. Probably the greatest amount of time I devoted in India to improvement of electoral rolls. Doesn't require a law, didn't require constitutional change, just an executive order properly doing it. It took me 15, 20 years, not even politicians in government, election commission. So that's the way it is. We do our best to accelerate it and do it the right way so that any change brought about has bigger impact. Right to information is one such law which opens many doors. It doesn't mean it solves all problems.
Sir, this is Tasin again. And first past the post system, FPTP system tends to overrepresent larger political parties and it underrepresents smaller political parties. Do you think the time has come to switch to proportional representation method as most of the people are looking for alternative political parties?
I completely agree with you, Tasin. Not only for reasons of representation, that's only one problem. And frankly, that problem to me is not a very serious problem. Though it's ideal to get representation in proportion to the vote, that is not the major reason. The first past the post system is the primary reason why you have this vote buying, massive vote buying, corruption, freebies, and division in society. Because the marginal vote that you need to get elected, you don't know where it is. You know, a candidate in first past the post system is like an examination going student. You may be well prepared, you're a medical student. You know how tough medical examinations are and how tense you guys feel. I'm a medical doctor myself, so I can put myself in your shoes. I was there 40 years ago, 45 years ago. So you're very tense. Even if you studied very well, that one question or that one chapter you haven't studied very well, you think that's the question you're going to get and you'll fail. Right or wrong? The candidate also is like that. He is worried, even if he's otherwise reasonably competent and he has a decent vote, because one vote more means success, one vote less means defeat, there is fear. And therefore there's desperation, this bidding for competitive vote. That's how per vote now in some states like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, 1,000, 2,000 rupees per vote is not uncommon now. Whereas in a proportionality model, that will not be required. In the first past the post system, the fellows who can bring money, caste power, and freebies, they are the ones who are electable. They are heroes. In a proportional system, the people who have credibility, who are now electorally useless, they become the heroes because their credibility brings more share of the vote. The Manmohan Singhs of the world, the many people in BJP who could never, Arun Jaitley, for instance, could never get elected to Lok Sabha. And there are many other people in all parties who are respected, but who are unfit for lower house elections in the first past the post system. So they would actually become electoral assets in a proportionality model. It will change the nature of politics. But my suspicion is this was possible 15 years ago. I worked very hard to make that happen. We came this close. For whatever reason, it did not happen. Now I suspect there is no appetite for this. Therefore, the other thing that we should now look at, and I'm seriously pursuing that, is a direct election at the head of the government with clear separation of powers. At least if the leader is elected directly at the state level, local level, national level, also this is desire. It does not depend on the MLAs, MPs seats. Therefore, the malpractice at the local level are not required. The leader's stature, public confidence in him or her, and the past record will be more important. And buying the whole state or the country is not really economical. The risk is too high, the reward is too little. Whereas buying a constituency seat, each person is willing to spend the 10, 20, 30 crores and risk it. You can't risk 2,000 crores for the state and 10,000 crores for the country. It's too much. So the whole system will change, and the MLAs and MPs will not call the shots. Local governments will become strong, and whoever is elected as a leader does not depend on the MLA's support for survival. Therefore, democracy and politics will be changed. So we have to look at incentives, not change for change's sake, because every country, with whatever be the kind of electoral system, they're unhappy. Let's not think that any system is perfect. There are problems. But given India's conditions, what is more likely to bring the better incentives and therefore change the outcomes and nature of politics? That's what we should look at.
Hello, sir. This is Rohit again. Sir, in the
Yes,
present scenario, most of the students are running behind IT companies for jobs, but none are really interested in taking entrepreneurship, sir, under the Make in India scheme. Is it really a boon or bane towards the development of our nation, sir?
No, the answer is obvious. Your question itself answered itself. Without entrepreneurship, new idea, technologies, new ways of marketing, simply no employment, no value addition, no incomes. But look at it slightly differently. How come that the same Indians and go to other countries, they're very successful? And even when the illiterate and semi-illiterate people, millions of them doing small businesses from a headload, the lady who takes the headload thing and then sells it, the vegetables or something else, to a pushcart vendor, to somebody else who ekes out a livelihood on the roadsides, the hawkers. Who are all these people? Very small people. They're not seeking anything from the government, but they're entrepreneurial. They're working hard to eke out a livelihood. It's part of our culture, part of the Indian ethos. Unfortunately, the governance system, earlier because of the socialist mumbo jumbo and state control and people don't have economic freedom. Now, because the remnants of unnecessary regulation or corruption or the factors of production, land, labor, laws, and credit, they're not yet liberalized, and free access is not given to genuine entrepreneurs. We have huge problems. If you liberate that, I think our people, the rich and the poor, the well-educated, not so well-educated, the technocrats, the other sectors, they will be entrepreneurs. I have no doubt about it. So the real issue is not that the people are not entrepreneurial. There's no climate to promote entrepreneurialism.
Yes, sir. I would like to.
Hello?
Yes, sir. I would like to request Tahsin to ask again, sir. Thank you.
Sir, this is Tahsin again.
Yes, that's it.
In India, our educational system is such that it is providing educated ones, but not skilled ones. What are your views on this and our present educational system, sir?
Tahsin, we already discussed this when I think you or somebody else asked the question about in the context of COVID. What can we do? I already mentioned what I have to say. Things are pretty dismal right now. Therefore, COVID has not disrupted anything in education. It's a myth. It gave us an opportunity because now there is a compulsion to do it differently. We might as well use this opportunity because we have nothing to lose. If things are going very well, disruption is dangerous, potentially. Tomorrow could be worse than today. If things are doing rotten, if you change things, how are they going to be worse? They can only get better if you try to think a little hard. So I think there's an opportunity now. But the heart of the issue, if you ask me, one thing that is the center of the problem, we don't know how to measure outcomes. Our examination system is disgusting. It depends on rote learning and poor evaluation methods and mass copying often in most parts of the country, particularly at the school level, etc. Now, if you actually look at the outcomes, learning outcomes, rather than rote learning, let's be truthful, in most examinations in India from school to university, if you mug up the last 3 years question papers, you are sure to get first class. How can that be education? It's a costly joke. If the examination is intelligent, does not give premium to rote learning and remembering things. but actually makes you think and look at problem solving, applying your knowledge. At school level, essentially communication, applying mathematical concepts and logic so that you can actually derive conclusions on the given data or observed data, which is science. So if you're measuring that rather than mugging up this or that, or last year's question paper, automatically the same kids, the same parents, the same teachers, the same managements, the same schools will deliver much better. That is one. There are many other things to be done. But the critical lever in a situation where the demand side is very strong, the kids are intelligent and work very hard. Even the poor parents are willing to spend a lot of money out of pocket to send their kids to private schools in the hope that there's better education. But it's not true. In many cases, and private schools are not delivering much better because the overall architecture is pretty bad. The governments too are spending some money. We complain about the governments not spending enough in education, but if truth be told, only 50% of the kids in India are in the government sector. The rest are in the private sector. Even that the government is spending 3% of the GDP in education, no, we could spend more, but if money is not yielding better dividends, why spend more money at all? Money is not the problem. Society values education. Our society tells us education. If you get into IIT, if you get into medicine, get into IAS, something else, see the way the whole society celebrates. Paper coverage, your first there, your interview, your education. You have all the factors in place. We just don't have the capacity to deliver properly. I think the central issue is how do you evaluate? How do you measure? And at the university level, in addition to this, how do you make education relevant to society's needs? Because employment is a function of meeting society's needs. If these two things are addressed, I think we can improve quite significantly very fast.
Sir, what is your opinion on present medical education in India, sir? And what are the changes would you like to suggest?
Medical education is a little better because it is oriented on the theoretically, at least. No, there is a theory examination, there is a clinical examination, the long case, the short case, the spotter, so on and so forth, then the viva, etc. Conceptually, it is sound. But again, what happened over the years? Medical examinations went into a rut. Again, medical school, if you have all these beautiful guides, right? You have all kinds of last 10 years, 20 years question paper, question bank and all that. If you carefully select those questions and do, you're reasonably confident of first class. So that's why I am working on objectively structured clinical examination, OSCE, the way they do in Britain, for instance. If only the medical student knows exactly what are the clinical outcomes that are expected of her. And then you have a very objective mechanism so that the subjectivity of the professor or corruption do not get in. And there are ways of doing it. All kinds of methods are available. If you do that, everything else is in place because some of the brightest kids are entering medicine. Medicine is a very competitive field and the intensity of competition to get into medicine is enormous. So if you do that, I think a lot of things will fall in place. And if everything, the training and the way the structuring of the hospital and the clinical work is, they're all oriented towards objectively structured clinical examination, I think things will improve significantly. Otherwise, you don't have to look at the curriculum. Only thing is, we also must prepare, at least at undergraduate level, for family medicine substantially, rather than merely preparing them for all specialties, which we prepare, which is good, which is necessary. I am completely in favor. But simultaneously, there must be this orientation of general practice of dealing with a patient on a day-to-day basis as the first point of contact. That's the only thing I would like to add in terms of curriculum and emphasis. Otherwise, it's all about the way you evaluate.
Sir, this is
Good evening, sir.
So this is Savan. So
yes, Savan.
What?
You're not audible. Hello, Rohit. Somebody, whoever
Yes,
is moderator.
Saugan, you can.
Am I audible now, sir?
Yes, you're audible now. Go ahead.
Okay, sir. What measures can be taken to stop the brain drain that is happening in our country?
Saugand, right?
Yes, sir.
Saugand, why should you stop the brain drain? Tell me.
Sir, so one thing is that a lot of resources are being used by these people, and they finally go ahead and settle abroad, and so they don't contribute to India's economy to any extent, right? And the only
Okay.
thing that they perhaps give is perhaps remittance to their family, which only lasts for one generation, and it does not carry to other generations, which is
Okay,
why it is a problem.
let me invert the problem and then look at it slightly differently. I would say brain drain is better than brain in the drain. If the brains are not deployed by the society productively, it's better that the brains are deployed elsewhere and they bring back not only money, remittance is only a small part of it, technology, skills, best practices. Take medical field, for instance. Some of the best doctors in India today, doing the most sophisticated interventions, they are people trained in Britain or elsewhere. They have brought the best practices. They've improved tertiary care in India dramatically. If that exposure is not there, I don't think within India we could have created that capability. So it's not true that we're not getting back anything. We're actually getting back a lot. Ideas, practices, skills, etc. Now, I'm not saying we're not losing something, but why are we losing? In a large higher education edifice of about 15, 20 million youngsters studying in colleges and universities, graduating every year, you're creating very few with real ability. And because a small slice is available and a significant section is migrating to the best countries in the world where there are better opportunities, we are feeling the pinch. The answer does not lie in preventing them from going, because how can you prevent them? And forcibly, if you retain them here without utilizing them anyway, how is it going to help? The answer is broaden the talent pool. If 15 million people are graduating every year, why can't we have 15 million people reasonably well educated so that the talent pool is broadened? That is the answer. Not preventing these kids from going abroad, because that only makes them sullen, resentful. And we're not utilizing them here. It's not that we are doing a great job of utilizing them. I know many people talk about brain drain. If you look at it in one way, it appears sensible. But look at it slightly differently, you'll find the problem actually is different. So I don't agree that brain drain is costing India, because without brain drain, there's no evidence that we are using the talent very productively in the country. So one is enlarge the talent pool. Second is create conditions whereby the brains can be deployed here well. Look at China. There's a reverse migration now. Because they see economic opportunities, they see the talents can flourish, they see they can do branding, they can innovate, they can do great things. Let's do that. They'll come.
Thank you, sir. I would like request Vamsi Chaitanya to ask.
Hi, sir. This is Vamsi again.
Hi, Vamsi.
My question is regarding civil services.
Yes.
Every year, a lot of talented and deserving candidates with a lot of enthusiasm are getting into civil services. But still, we are not able to bring the development that we are expecting in India. What do you think is the reason for this? Do they tend to deviate after getting into service? Or are there any other reasons for this?
I was one of those guilty in the sense that once I joined the services, probably tens of thousands of Telugu youngsters started aspiring for that, and it became an industry in Andhra Pradesh. I hope that when I left government, at least a lot of people will do some serious thinking whether that's the only way to make something of their life and their time. I agree with you. The aspiration of many parents and kids is to join the IAS, and countless people are giving their time and energy. And we are certainly recruiting some of the best talents. And there could be some improvement in the process of selection, but by and large, the UPSC is doing a great job, at least at the national level. It's doing an honest job, an impartial job, and a reasonably efficient job in a timely manner. But what's happening is within 10 years, we make monkeys of most of these brightest products. And there are three primary reasons why it is happening. The first is there's a generalist approach. Modernization is about specialization. You acquire greater and greater specialization, greater skills in delivering that service or producing that commodity or those services much more efficiently. Whereas our whole civil service structure is generalist. Anybody with a bit of common sense can do almost anything. It's a dangerous delusion. You cannot take care of health today, education tomorrow, defense day after tomorrow, finance the fourth day, commerce the fifth day, and roads and transport and something else the sixth day. It's absurd. No human being can do that. It will be shoddy. It will be very, very substandard. And our system does not encourage specialization. The second is there is a monopoly of all the key jobs. Irrespective of how you perform, how much you know, you are guaranteed that all the key jobs are yours and yours alone. Why is there any incentive to excel, to perform, to show that you can actually outshine others? There's no competition, there's no choice. And the third is, once you get in, for the next 35 years, almost nobody can touch you. No matter how shoddy your performance is, how corrupt sometimes your behavior is, how arrogant your conduct is, by and large, you'll be there and you get time-bound promotions, etc. It's a disaster. There's no time to go into details. If these three things are addressed efficiently, create a mechanism for specialization, for all key positions, ensure that there is competition and choice from other services in the government, plus from everybody in the country, the best brains in the country. You may not join civil services initially, but you gained expertise and knowledge in a certain field, and you have skills and you're an acknowledged person in that area, then you want to come in and make a significant difference there for a few years, and you may want to go out or continue. But give that opportunity and let them compete freely with these people for the key positions. And third is, every 10 years or 15 years, let there be a system of screening and weeding out without any odium, without any punishment. Say thank you, like in armed forces, what happens after you reach a certain level? The next level, you have only very few jobs. 70-80% of people, they give them a handshake and they give them the pension and other things, they go home without any insult. Next level again, when the next time comes, again, a significant section go home, the others will rise, because you can't have as many generals as officers who join the service. It's ridiculous, right? Therefore, it becomes a pyramidal structure and people go out from time to time. Who go out and who remain depends on their performance. The proper evaluation is there. If all these three things are done, the same civil service will work brilliantly, because these are some of the finest people in the country.
Sir, this is Shweta again. Would
Yes,
you
sure.
like to share with us how you prepare for your UPSC exam and how much time you devoted for it?
Shweta, I'll be a very bad example. So don't take my example seriously, because I didn't take UPSC as an examination. I didn't even know anything about it. I didn't think of IAS during my college days, only because of the emergency, then collapse of emergency, then Janata, then collapse of Janata, and from that anguish, I was searching what should I do as a human being to make my society, my country better. Then somebody suggested, why don't you join the IAS? I had a vague notion that doctors at the time were not allowed to join the IAS. That was true. Doctors were prohibited for some strange reason. So I said that to my friend. She said, no, JP, only yesterday I saw a newspaper headline on commission is appointed, Kothari Commission, and they recommended the doctor should now be allowed. I said, then Meera, I'm taking the exam. So it happened spontaneously. And when I decided to join the IAS that way, that spontaneous way, I did not even know that UPSC conducted the examination. I was pretty well informed because I didn't care much about this. I didn't even bother to know. It was one of my professors who said UPSC conducts the examination. And then I didn't really prepare. I chose the optionals because of the aptitude and a sense of understanding what is what, rather than scoring. And there are actually some subjects I did not even open. I did not even open it. International relations, I did have a book, Palmer Perkins. I did not open the book. Maybe I just browsed through it quickly, but I never bothered to open. Political science, except political thought, which you have to study, because what somebody thought is not, you can't originally give some ideas. But political science per se, 90% of it I did not have to open, because I was already a very well-informed human being. And I thought greatly about the country and its present and its future at that point of time. So my preparation would not be very relevant. But basically what it means is, it's not how many hours you put in. Each person has a certain style. This is about India's future. It's not about your job. If it is not a job, there are 100 other jobs. Probably give you better rewards and better opportunity to rise and fewer working hours, less stress, all those things. If you really passionately believe in the future of India, then you bring the qualities that can make a difference to the future of India. So that is the single most yardstick. Otherwise, even if a person gets selected, eventually they'll be frustrated and the country will not get the best out of them. So the kind of preparation is entirely individualistic. Obviously, there is a certain curriculum, there are some optionals, and then you have to go to a certain structure. But the central issue is not studying like an ordinary examination, but are you a problem solver? Have you given deep thought to India? Is there a consistency of logic and philosophy? And do you care? Is there empathy? Is there deep commitment of a long-term kind? Or is it merely a pyrrhic thing, some temporary emotion or some personal ambition rather than larger issues related to the country? So what I would urge is, look at India and her problems and her challenges and her opportunities. Look at what you can contribute to make a difference to the country. Look at where the country's future is. You'll be okay. And if you don't make it to civil services, heavens are not falling. Please don't believe that those who got in are fantastic. Those who are outside are not. There are so many who are in who are useless. There are so many who are out who are exceptional. So you can always make a contribution. One of my goals, many goals in life, transforming India. One of the goals is that bright young people can join any time in government and then make a difference. That's why parallel entry, competition choice, I'm deeply committed to that. So hopefully one day that will happen. You can make a contribution that we don't have to enter, in the old-fashioned way. The point of entry need not determine your contribution to the country. So don't worry about whether you make it or not. If you're interested, you make an effort. But obviously, and there's a limited number of slots that are going to be filled, not everybody will get a chance. And the fellow who gets in is not necessarily the brightest fellow. He might have, the mental frame might have been good, the examiner was kind that day, and therefore scored you a little more liberally, or whatever happened. So don't think that those who got in are exceptional, those who didn't get in are useless. That's a very unproductive way of thinking. You can make a contribution to the country in 100 different ways.
Hello, sir. I'm Soumya again.
Yes, Soumya.
What do you think is a better option for youth to serve nation, politics or civil services? And when do you think you serve nation better? When you were an IAS officer or when you were a politician?
I don't think there's a single answer, there's a single way. If you want to make it, you obviously need some opportunity. Sometimes you create the opportunity, sometimes opportunity searches for you. But oftentimes here, we're all busy with our ambition to achieve something, get into a position, not achieve something, get into a, that's not the achievement. At best, the position gives you an opportunity to make a difference. Because we're busy about getting there, not understanding why you're getting there, the country is messed up. Politicians who want to get into power, after that, they don't know what they want. MLA spends 25 crores to become MLA. He doesn't even know what to do there. You ask half the MLAs what they're supposed to be doing, they have no clue. Therefore, they do influence peddling from morning to evening. Contracts, tenders, transfers, postings, police cases. That's not what you're supposed to do. MPs, officers, others, we are so busy trying to get somewhere because you are insecure. You want to appear that you're better than others. You're superior to others. You are controlling, you're dominating. That is the impulse. Then there's a task to be performed. You want to bring to that task certain innovation, certain creativity, certain ability to actually make change possible. If you have that approach, everything, everywhere, each has a role. There's not a job where you can't make a difference. Oftentimes, we are viewing the job as our personal adornment. It's about us. I think it's a very dangerous way in public service. The job is about the people of this country, the benighted, the long-suffering, poor people of the country, poor or middle class or rich, the people of the country who are not getting what is due to them. We are making a mess of our lives needlessly. If we understand what can be done, there's not a position in India where you can't make a meaningful contribution. Obviously, some give you a greater opportunity, but that's why if you really have talent, have the ability to actually deliver most, they will rise rather than those who put in the longest years or those who are the son of so-and-so or those who have the most money. That's why many changes that many of us are fighting for are really about that putting the right people in the right places for the sake of the country, not for their sake, for the sake of society, for our collective needs.
Thank you, sir.
Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Sir, Raj.
Sir, with your permission, we would like to have a few audience questions as well, sir. First, we have Manoj Chandra who would like to ask you, sir.
By all means.
Yes.
Mhm.
Sir, I am Manoj, studying in
Yes.
IIT College of Engineering, BTech, third year, mechanical.
Yes, Manoj.
Sir, I have a question for you, and that is, what employment opportunities do you see for the upcoming youth after this crisis, especially in the suffering industrial field, facing the economic distress and the drop in the GDP of the nation?
It's a tough challenge, Manoj. I wish I knew the answer. I'd be lying. I don't think anybody knows the answer accurately, anywhere in the world, actually. But you can look at certain areas which appear to be promising. One is, as the digital marketing and a different way of doing things in the context of COVID, that now becomes a necessary thing. It's not merely an option you can exercise, but it's a necessary thing. The fields where the new marketing models, new business models, they can fulfill the needs of the people without personal interface. Obviously, that's one area that's going to grow. The second broad area is, if you look at some sectors where we're hopelessly underserved, and if you create the skills and the necessary management structures, enormous employment is possible. Let me give you an example of healthcare. In Britain, about 2.3% of the population, about 5% of the workforce is employed in healthcare alone. In the United States, about 4.5 to 5% of the population, about 12% of the workforce is employed in healthcare alone. Not merely doctors and nurses, the whole gamut of people, from health insurance to lab technicians to physiotherapists to biochemists, a whole lot of people across the spectrum. About, I think, more than 12 million people are working in maybe 16 million people are working in the United States in the healthcare sector. In India, for a population of 1.4 billion, only 3.2 million or maybe 3.6 million people are working in health sector, government and private put together. If you actually restructure healthcare, and healthcare is desperately needed. If anything, COVID crisis told us how deficient our healthcare system is. People like me have been talking from rooftops for years and decades. If you only restructure healthcare in an optimal way, with the available resources, I'm not talking of fantastic resources, you can create at least 10, 15 million new jobs. 10, 15 million new jobs. So don't look at jobs in a traditional way. A job is a function of fulfilling the needs of community and society. If you're not fulfilling the need, you must fulfill the need and convert that into a job opportunity for those who want to produce. And third broad thing is, the supply chains are so disrupted globally. People now want alternative supply chains. They don't want to depend on one China or one other country, from surgical mask to ventilator. It's absurd. So India has an opportunity. We have missed out big time in the last 25 years. We've been talking tall, but we have not done much. Take, for instance, government sector. We have cotton. We have a very large number of unemployed people. Easily we can give them skills and they can work for a decent wage. And yet, India is producing and exporting only $17 billion worth of garments. China, which is way up the value chain, much richer than us, this is a low value product, and yet they're exporting $175 billion because we messed up many things. I don't want to go into details now. The factors of production are messed up. From that to the big supply chains, now if India creates 10 or 12 big hubs across the country with land banks, remove the regulatory barriers and other difficulties, at least in those pockets, and say, you come and invest. There's an alternative supply chain here with enormous talent pool and a lot of unemployed workers who are willing to work, reliable labor. People will come in. So you start with that and let us see how the future brings. So we can see at least 3-4 areas. If you're serious about it, we can make a huge difference.
Next is
Thank you,
Jitesh Reddy, who's ready to ask you a question, sir.
Yes, Jitesh.
Hello, sir. I'm Jitesh. I'm from Visakhapatnam.
Yes, Jitesh.
My question is related to internal security and economy too. Does boycotting Chinese products during this crisis help our country, as we import several medical kits like PPEs and etc. from China, or does de-escalation talks or surgical strikes against China does these factors help Indian economy or the border issues?
No, all the above. We need diplomacy. Ultimately, what is the best way to protect our own interests? War is not an option, not in 21st century world. Let's take India, Pakistan. Pakistan obviously is much smaller. We are in every which way bigger. But we're not willing to go for a war with Pakistan because the cost of war is far greater than the benefit of peace. Even in relation to India, Pakistan, even for India. Let alone Pakistan anyway, war is destructive. Similarly, when you do China, where there's asymmetry and China is more powerful than us, war is not an option for us. War could not be an option for them either. So the best way to ensure that there is peace and harmony is to make the adversary, I don't want to call them enemies, adversary, realize that the cost of war is far greater than the benefit of peace. The benefit of peace can be the men you lose in a war, the material you lose, the global public esteem that you lose, the global or national economic interest that you lose, the markets you lose, and a whole lot of other, the soft power that will be dented, etc., etc. So I think we must try all these things, but obviously there are limitations. If China is the world's manufacturer, if China is supplying most of the goods at the lowest cost at reasonable quality, then we can't shut ourselves out of it completely. But making China realize that for a growing power like India, to lose that market forever is not a smart thing. Perhaps that's also one of the tools. So we should not go overboard and we should not indulge in hyper-nationalism, because if we indulge in hyper-nationalism, Chinese also will indulge in that. And then what will happen is, even if the leaders want peace, the public opinion and the media will be so volatile and so emotional that the leaders will be compelled to do confrontational things, which is not good for any country, either country. So within reasonable limits, making the adversary realize that there is also an economic cost of pursuing a path, and perhaps the gain is much less than the loss. And these are all some tools, but obviously there are limitations of each of these tools.
Sir, we would like to have one last question from Siddharth VS.
Sir, good evening, sir. My name is Siddharth. I'm from IIT Kharagpur. So basically, my question is, today, like lot of people are connected to the internet through this like subsidy of internet costs through Jio and all. So my question is that a lot of fraudulent use of the internet is happening right now. Like a lot of people from the villages are trying to scam people, even in India and even in abroad also. And also, second thing is that a lot of polarization is happening in the political sphere of the Facebook and all the necessary things. So do you think there should be a course or something which should be inducted into NCERT in CBSE right from class 8 to class 10, so that the students are educated well enough?
Siddharth, this is a great question without any great answer. Because world over, we're finding this problem: fake news, hyper-emotionalism, volatility, abuse rather than reasoned and sensible arguments. Just because I disagree with you doesn't mean that I am disrespectful or abusive, and just because you don't agree with me, you should not be abusive. We must have a civilized discourse based on evidence and logic. But unfortunately, the social media and internet and instant communication are promoting volatility. Even if you see the likes, etc., the more volatile you are, the more absurd you are, the more abusive you are, the more likes you get. The more balanced you are, the more boring you are. The more reasonable you are, the more logical you are, the less likes you get. So I suppose it is pandering to the lowest common denominator of human beings. So I don't know the answer. I think world over there is this concern, but certainly making young people realize that it's a powerful tool if you don't use it to your advantage. But if you only want to indulge in hyper-emotionalism in the short term, ultimately you end up losing. That's not the best way. And also it's not the best way to persuade people. You want to persuade people. Only a very intemperate young man wants to win all arguments. I used to want to win all arguments. Now I don't want to win arguments. I want to persuade. I want to influence people, their thinking. I want to see what is their thinking. And I want to see in what manner I can meet their aspirations. And see that we find a common ground. Rather than proving that I am superior to you intellectually or otherwise, I know better and you are wrong and I am right. That is a child's passion. Whereas adult passion is, how do we work together? How do we persuade each other? How do I see the adversaries or the person who's arguing with me? How do I see his or her point of view and accept the merit in that point of view, convey the merit in my point of view, and see that there is some kind of a synthesis. That is how all great leaders behaved. Just look at every successful leader throughout history. The great leaders are not the ones who bullied others. They are the ones who understood the others. They interacted, they found common ground, they persuaded, and therefore their influence is enduring and very large. Unfortunately, social media and internet are about narrow, instant communication. Tomorrow, nobody cares. Their influence will never endure, but the short-term damage is real. So I don't know the answer, but certainly making young people realize how much this could be a tool to enrich your lives rather than make a mess of things and create hostility may help. But I don't know the answer, honestly.
The thing is that me and a group of my friends are actually able to find sources which are necessary to equip young people to defend themselves from the threats they face online. Like be it anything, like even political manipulation also. So, but what is the way we can segregate them? I mean, aggregate them, and we can properly go through the NCERT board, and like what is the proper protocol to approach?
We can take this offline. I don't know the ready answer. Let's take it offline, and then let us see how best we can do it. And if I understand what is it you are looking at, I don't know if they listen, but at least we'll try and knock some doors and see what best we can do. But I think it's a good idea. It certainly is a good idea. Let us see.
Thanks.
Sir, thank you, sir, for spending your valuable time with us. I would now request Saugan to present the vote of thanks.
Before that, Rohit,
yes, sir.
Thank you for this very patient audience. I would like to leave you with a couple of thoughts. For a smart person, for somebody who always wants to see something better emerges, there's nothing like a crisis. The glass is always half full. There's nothing like a dark cloud. There's always a silver lining. Truly, even COVID, I think, has enormous silver linings, particularly for a country like India. When everything is wonderful, then a disruption is a nuisance. When many things are less than wonderful, the disruption is actually an opportunity. I would urge you to, instead of panicking or indulging in hyperbole, please look at this temporary health crisis as a great opportunity for the country and to redesign institutions, to reshape society, to educate people, to build mechanisms in institutions. The second broad thing is you live in the best of all possible ages. Despite all the problems we face, this is a fantastic age. And it's very easy for us to lose sight of that and complain all the time about how bad things are. I briefly mentioned to you, if 30 years ago we had COVID crisis, how terrible it would have been. In many sectors, life in the past, it's all nice to say it was wonderful and all that, it's all bunk up. This is the best life you can think of. And your life is going to be better 20 years hence, 30 years hence. So don't lose hope. Be optimistic. We have now the technology and the resources to make life much better. Barring some cataclysmic event which we cannot control as human beings, a meteor hitting Earth on a big enough scale to wipe out mankind, I don't know. It may happen tomorrow. It may happen 1 year later. It may happen 1 million years later. There's no point worrying about it because I can't control, you can't control. Barring such cataclysmic events, I don't think that we have any serious problem. Even problems like global warming, we have enough technology and resources if you have the wisdom and the political and economic institutions to utilize the available knowledge and technology and resources. You are in the forefront of this struggle to apply this knowledge, these resources in a productive way to make lives better. Be cheerful, enjoy yourselves, have a sense of humor. Don't be dull, dry, boring people just because you care for society. You can care for society and also enjoy humor and good things of life. Only then can it be sustainable. Otherwise, you will deter many people from taking up pursuits like this. I wish you all the very best. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your advices, sir. Thank you, sir.
All the best.
Thank you, sir.